Welcome to Mostly AI. I'm Derek Kane. A quick note, outside of my role as host, this podcast is entirely AI generated. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about something that sounds boring on paper, literally, but turned into one of the more interesting AI stories of 2026, Document OCR.
Okay, I'll admit, OCR is not usually the phrase that gets me excited on a Thursday.
Right, exactly. For years, OCR was just infrastructure. Tesseract, Google Cloud Vision, done. Nobody thinks about it again.
It scans a receipt, it spits out text, everybody moves on.
But something changed. Vision language models showed up, and the question stopped being, can you read the text, and became, can you understand the document?
Which is a much bigger question, especially once you're talking about contracts. A scanned lease or a merger agreement isn't just words on a page. It's clauses that reference other clauses, tables, signatures, definitions buried on page 14 that change the meaning of page 2.
Exactly. And that's the frame for today, 2026's frontier models, and specifically DeepSeek, which has been making a lot of noise in this space. So let's start with a headline. DeepSeek released DeepSeek-OCR2 on January 27th of this year. It's a relatively small model, 3 billion parameters, but it's built around something they call optical context compression.
Okay, unpack that for me. What does optical context compression actually mean in practice?
So the idea, from what DeepSeek published, is that instead of treating a document as a stream of characters to transcribe, the model uses a vision encoder, they call it DeepEncoder V2, to see the page more like a human reader does. You scan a contract, you don't read letter by letter. You take in structure, headers, paragraphs, tables, and your eyes move in a logical order.
Right. So it's less OCR that happens to use an LLM and more a model that treats reading as a visual structural task first.
That's a good way to put it. And that matters a lot for a document like a contract, where losing the structure means losing the meaning. A clause without its parent section is just noise.
Okay, but here's my skeptical question. Is DeepSeek actually good at this compared to everybody else? Because there's no shortage of models claiming to be the best at document AI right now.
Fair. And this is where I want to be careful, because the honest answer is, it depends what you're optimizing for. There's a benchmark called OmniDocBench. It's become the standard for this in 2026. Over 1,100 real documents, 9 categories, including legal contracts, invoices, forms, financial reports.
And what does it actually show?
As of this spring, the leaderboard has specialized OCR models, GLM-OCR and PaddleOCR-VL, sitting at the top. GLM-OCR scored about 94.6, PaddleOCR-VL right behind it at 94.5.
Wait, so the big frontier LLMs are actually behind on this?
On raw parsing accuracy, yes. Gemini 3.1 Pro comes in around 90.3 and GPT-5.4 around 85.8. Claude Opus 4.6 hasn't published a score on this particular benchmark.
That's kind of humbling, honestly. The giant generalist models losing to smaller purpose-built ones.
It is, and I think that's actually the most important, least hyped finding in all of this. When a task is narrow enough, read this page correctly. A focused, much smaller model can just win. Specialization beats scale, at least on that one axis.
Okay, so then where does DeepSeek and the other frontier models actually pull ahead? Because clearly there's still a reason people are excited about them for this use case.
2 places, really. First, real-world mess. Benchmarks are cleanish. Production contracts are not. Rotated scans, coffee-stained pages, multi-column layouts, a handwritten margin note next to a printed clause. Frontier models, because they're trained on such a broad range of reasoning tasks, tend to handle those edge cases with more grace than a narrowly trained specialist.
Because they're not just pattern matching characters, they're reasoning about what the document is trying to say.
Exactly. Second, cost and context length. Gemini 3.1 Pro and GPT-5.4 both offer roughly a 1 million token context window, so you can push very long multi-page contracts through in one pass without losing continuity between page 1 and page 80.
And DeepSeek's whole pitch has always been price, right?
Right. That's DeepSeek's edge specifically. Frontier-adjacent performance at a fraction of the cost. For a team that's processing thousands of contracts a month, that's not a nice to have. That's the difference between a project getting greenlit or not.
So it's not really DeepSeek versus Gemini versus GPT. It's more like 3 different tools with 3 different jobs.
That's exactly right, and I think that's the takeaway I want people to leave with today. So, if you're building or buying a contract extraction pipeline in 2026, here's the honest, unglamorous truth. There is no single winner. If your job is purely extract this table correctly, a specialized model like GLM-OCR or PaddleOCR-VL will probably outperform a frontier LLM, and for less money.
But if your documents are messy, long, or you need the model to actually reason about what a clause means in context of the whole contract,
then a frontier model earns its cost. Gemini 3.1 Pro for scale and long context, DeepSeek for reasoning adjacent performance at a much lower price point, GPT-5.4 and Claude Opus 4.6 where you already trust those ecosystems.
Honestly, that feels like a healthier way to think about this than the usual which model wins leaderboard chase.
It is. The fragmentation that used to define the space, scattered vendors, scattered formats, scattered tools, is actually resolving into something coherent. Not one model to rule them all, but a real, usable toolkit. That's our show for today. If you're evaluating document AI for contracts, invoices, or any paper-heavy workflow, test on your actual documents before you commit to a model. The benchmarks are a starting point, not the final word.
And if you want the fuller breakdown with sources and the benchmark numbers we talked about today, it's linked below.
Head to the link in the description to see the full write-up. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See you then.
You've been listening to Mostly AI, a podcast built with AI-generated content, production, and audio elements. Thanks for being here. Until next time.